All right, so yeah, so I was saying the Moodle site is up and running, and then the mini project should be available by 23:59. I think it should be available by then. Scratch this. We're not sure about who is coming, like I mentioned that doodle poll.
Okay. Clarification.
Yes.
So the open date for the mini project is today.
Yes. So what will happen is today, once I send that email, there'll be a list of projects, right? Mm-hmm. Your task is just to say, I'm going to do this project. We'll probably use Doodle as well so that people see who has chosen what as well.
Okay. What if two people pick the same?
No, it won't be possible because, well, we'll make it in such a way that once you tick one, no one can tick it again. It's easy, right? Right, so, but the due date, the key thing here is we have, I think about, is it a total of 6 weeks? So the due date is May 17th for all the 3 deliverables. We already had a discussion of what is expected of us. I think, did we? I think we did, right? We said it will be split into 3, so there'll be like the implementation, there'll be the technical report, which is 4 to 6 page document. Specifications will be sent through today. And then there'll be a presentation as well on what you did. And then the paper, like I said, is due today, and then you should start deciding who is going to be the first one to suggest, I'm guessing one of the mics should be on or something. Yeah. I guess. Yeah, so someone needs to volunteer to be the first one. I was joking with the guys on Tuesday to say, I remember when I was a grad student and it was like paper rotations, no one would volunteer. Well, at some stage, when you're a senior student, you know the importance of this and so you volunteer. But we came up with mechanisms like, we use the last name, right, in ascending order, in descending order, right? Okay. So whoever is last or first is the one who is going to suggest a paper. That's usually a better way of doing it. Or you can agree as a group to say, I think I'm going to be ready during this point in time. But it's a simple thing, really. Yeah. All right, so today's lecture session I thought was, it's supposed to be like this. We're supposed to get our hands dirty here. We just have a brief introduction of Python. And hopefully, I don't know, David, if you've already started looking into this as well, or it'll be your first time?
Python?
Yeah.
I haven't done anything extensive, but...
okay, so we'll gloss over the basics. If you want, what we can do is if you want us to skip some of the things, we can skip them. But what we did with the rest of the guys is we only got to finish part 1, actually. So Tuesday, I'm guessing you guys from Parliament start joining us this Tuesday, right? Because I think
we'll try it. There are also exams on Tuesday, but we'll see how we can work things out.
Right. So if you do that, then we should be able to continue with the rest of the guys and finish off Pandas, MATLAB, and scikit-learn. Just a brief introduction. We'll spend more time on Pandas and MATLAB because we'll start using scikit-learn once we start looking at those other subsequent themes, right? We'll extensively use Pandas and MATLAB once we look at the exploratory data analysis phase, like what happens there once you collect data and you start cleaning it up, right? And then what we did with the group as well is I gave a trial talk to give people an idea of what to expect when people like Lillian, for instance, and Francis come through, right? So I gave the talk, and I think I'll give the talk today as well. It's just a short talk of what I've done in the past. Yeah, and so we were supposed to also do a trial paper reading session, but we didn't have time, and it turns out people didn't read the paper that I'd suggested. Incidentally, the paper that I suggested, those links that I sent through, is based on the talk that I'm going to give. So it's, whether we like it or not, anyway, the paper summaries are starting now anyway, so yeah. But most of what is expected is aligned to those 2 papers that I suggested, the how to read a paper and how to read a computer science paper as well. You'll find a lot of interesting things. I found something interesting here. There's a guy called Saraj. He has a really popular YouTube channel. He does a lot of machine learning, mostly deep learning though. And accidentally, it's one of those recommendations that came through from YouTube. You know how when you watch certain things on YouTube, and yeah. And he was explaining how to read a paper, and it was like almost verbatim Anyway, it's fine. I wanted to show you, but it was exactly what is described in the how to read a paper reading I suggested. Like he was explaining the 3-pass process.
Sharab as in S-H-A-R-A-B?
Sorry?
Sharab.
Well, maybe we can see here. Just we have, seeing as we have. I notice that I spend a lot of, because I don't have a TV at home, so I spend a lot of time on YouTube. I've decided to invest in unlimited broadband from microwave, but they're thieves, right? So I go for the cheapest, most effective. They call it, is it unlimited? I've forgotten what they call it, but you can notice that I watch a lot of, I'm obsessed with dogs here, but
So how much is the unlimited for microwave?
$2.95.
Two-
$2.95 per month.
295 what?
Quite.
295 quarter?
Yeah.
No.
Yes. So all they
Oh,
did
that's
was,
broadband.
yes.
You guys are killing me. I paid 100 quarter for 100 meg.
What?
That's the 4G.
900 quarter?
Yeah.
It's I mean, if I don't know. I mean, it's
Killing me. I was considering
4G
going.
bundles are very expensive.
Yeah, I was considering joining Vodafone.
I never tried.
I mean, sorry, not Vodafone.
so. This is what I was referring to. So he, it's just a. Actually, it's a exact. He's explaining what is in that paper, really. But what I like about this channel, right? If we just quickly gloss through through the content that he has, the playlist. If you look at the playlist, he does. I mean, if you're obsessed with machine learning, and especially if you have aspirations of working on like image processing type problems or processing those kind of things, you notice that he's doing a lot of machine learning and deep learning type stuff. It's AI type stuff mostly, actually. Most of these things are based on that. And I guess you know this, right? I mean, you look at the number of people that are subscribed to him, then you know that.
One of them right now.
Oh, okay. Then he's, I mean, he obviously has good content if that's the case. Okay. Thought I'd mention that.
So you said that to that mailing list,
What's that?
the how to read a paper.
Yes. I don't know if you. I mean, you guys use Google Groups, right? It's you know, there's a web interface that you can. Yeah, I think you know this. I have to explain to our List 5310 class because they're not as tech-savvy as some of you. So if I like using the interface myself, so I think it's must have been. Is it this or? Nope. Should be the previous one. No. For exams. Yes, groups.google.com. So usually, you see the email that is sent out, right? The emails that you receive, like I know this other account is added there, as my personal account is added there, so I'll use this as an example. You know how, we still have time here, so we can play around with. You know how, this comes in the forums, I think. You know how, oh, there we go. This is what I was looking for. No. The screen is squished. I can't see the. You see these tabs? There's supposed to be a. You know, just search for CSC 57. So the mails that you receive, like, oh, so it was Teddy. I didn't see this. Oh, okay. So if I send a mail like this, you notice that the address thing, right? This address has this link here. This is what you can use to get there. Anyway, this is the group link, and then you can see the web interface the way I'm seeing it right now. Not that it's important anyway. So the one of these mails has the readings anyway. You want to go through those papers. It's just short papers, but they'll really they mostly talk about some of the things that I explained in the last lecture that we had, but the process that you follow through, the 3-pass process. All right, so get our hands dirty here. I like starting with this. So Python has a number of, I don't know if it's a number of Easter eggs, right? I like this. So when you get to the Python interpreter and you just say import this, it will show you what they call the Zen of Python that describes some of the cool things associated with Python. So things, and in fact, most of these things are tied to what you would typically find in what they call the Python enhancement proposal, the PEP 8. Is it PEP 8? That describes how you write well-structured Python code, right? So naming conventions that you should use. Things like when you're indenting, because it's a language that is, it uses indentation, right, for most things. They'll say you must use spaces as opposed to tabs, right? It's simple things, really. So how do you comment a class, and how do you comment functions and all those funny things, right? So it's quite nice. So I always like with starting out with this thing here. But so some of the interesting things about Python, I think things that you already know is it's an interpreted language. We know what this means. No need for a compiler. Like in Java, if you're using the command line, you'd have to run the Java compiler and then you run Java to execute it. But with Python, you just run the interpreter, right? On the script that you'd have created, or the file that you have created, the source code. It's a scripting language, so what this means is it's similar to what you do when you're bash scripting. I don't know if you people at work have done a lot of bash scripting, shell scripting, you know, yeah. So it's similar to that, right? And I always like giving examples of the, I guess, I don't know if you've done this already. So if we wanted to say we write a simple Python program, let's say example here, CSC 5741, 2 people here, .py, right? And we say, we just wanted for I in, okay, we'll just say CSC 5741 is equal to, I guess it's just 2 people here, right? And we wanted to loop into CSC because it's iterable into this. Sorry, I had another discussion and we talk about IDEs with people here, and I was telling them, most of them were, because they're tech people, right? Yeah. Like, but what's the point of Wing 101, right? You want, when you're starting to use a programming language for the first time, you want to avoid mistakes, and when there's a mistake, you want the IDE to help you in identifying what the mistake is. Mm-hmm. If you're using something like a simple text editor like Notepad, or I use Kate or VI, although my VI is a bit enhanced here, which is why it knows that this is a Python program. So if I press enter, it indents it for me, right? Notice that? Mm-hmm. So I was telling them that it's always a good idea to use an IDE anyway. So simple thing here, just want to print here. We're printing this thing. And then when we write this Python program, this is what we'll do, right? Just print this. But because this is, we're saying this is a scripting language, what this means is we can do what we normally do to, sorry about that, what we normally do to shell scripts, right? I don't know if you guys have heard of this thing called the shebang, the so-called shebang, right? Mm-hmm. So you do this, you don't have to explicitly run the Python interpreter, but instead what you do is you just convert this into an executable file, right? And then you can do exactly what you do to a shell script, right? Execute this thing here, CSC. And I don't know if I should have, maybe I executed the wrong file. Boom, okay. And then we'll say CSC like that. So now I can run it just as I would like a shell script, any type of shell script that I'll be running, and it does the same thing, right? And I'm sure you know the obvious benefits of doing this. Like automation, when you're scripting, becomes a lot easier. So you can easily incorporate this shell script and these other fancy utility tools that come with like Linux, for instance, right? Becomes really useful. And in fact, once we start the data collection phase and kind of creating a pipeline that involves you analyzing your data using pandas and then doing some sort of plotting, this becomes useful. So something else, these are obvious things, it's general purpose, right? Python is everywhere these days. It's not just used in scientific computing here. I'm sure you've heard of Django, right? The Django Web Framework. Increasingly, more and more people actually use it to develop web applications, and Django happens to be one of those popular web frameworks, right? Web applications development. Yeah, so you can use it for scripting. You can pretty much use it for most. There are people that use it to develop desktop applications as well. So if you look at things like, is it Python Tink or something? There are actually libraries, plenty of libraries that you use to develop graphical user interface with Python, right? So if you're into that. And then obviously it's object-oriented, so the same cool things that you have access to object-oriented languages like Java, you gain access to Python, so you can create classes, right? And in fact, if you're one of those who's interested in seeing the underlying code structure of, the underlying code structure of these libraries that we're going to be using, you notice that they're actually made up of classes in there, right? Not that most of what we're going to do is going to involve that, because we'll be reusing things that have already been implemented for us, right? And then just to mention that what we're going to be working with here is Python 3, right? Just because most of the popular libraries have now transitioned to Python 3. So you'll find that if you're using, maybe by default, by the way, once you install an operating system like Ubuntu, if I check the no, you'd have noticed that I'm explicitly using this here. I don't know if you notice this. Python 3 here, right? Mm-hmm. The reason is, by default, my operating system, and most operating systems right now, they will tie your Python, your normal Python is a symbolic link to version 2.7. There we go. So you want to make sure that either you can fidget around with whatever you have to make sure, like if that mark, you make sure that this Python utility that you're running is actually making reference to 3, not 2.7. So we'll be using 3, yeah? Okay? Another cheap trick you can use is pretty much just, what do you call this? Uninstall Python 2.7, right? That'll make life a lot, if you want to. Unless if there are tools that you have that are dependent on that, in which case you don't want to.
Okay, for the Mac.
Yeah. And the Mac should have Python that comes by default with it, right? Have you checked what version it is?
Sure.
So just type Python space hyphen and then uppercase V. Okay, so we are fine then. Yeah.
But it's very easy for little people who have.
Yeah.
I'm running a different version of Java, but there's one I want to use for certain things. Just redirected.
Right.
Windows will not have that. It will be very unique.
You're using Windows? Yeah, there's nothing by default. So we'll use that cable. Yeah, it's fine. There's a process where it describes the installation process. It won't take long. In fact, we have some of the installers already available on the UNZA network. So you should be able to pick them up quickly. Yeah, so I said we can execute them as scripts, but also you'd have noticed once you started playing around with it that most people will start out by using the interpreter itself interactively, right? So I'll just call the interpreter Python 3 like that, and then this is really useful for debugging like single statements. We can write multiple statements, right? Like if I wanted to loop through this list, for instance, 1, 2, 3, the interpreter knows that this is a for loop, so it won't execute this statement. It knows that it's expecting more things, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll print X, for instance, and then it knows that potentially you'd want to type more things here, but in this case I want to end and just print X, and then I'll just print them like that, right? It becomes useful if...
What did you type? You just entered again?
Yeah, you just... So there we go. I just press enter, and then, well, because it's not intelligent enough to indent for me, I have to indent this, 1, 2, 3, 4. I think this has become muscle memory for me. So whenever I'm writing Python code, it's just 4 spaces all the time. I don't know. But you could just as well have, sorry?
A tab. How many spaces is a tab?
I don't, is it 5? Is it not 5? Tab. It goes up to X, so if 1, 2, 3, 4. I think tab is also So it's the same number of spaces, but apparently the way text file is interpreted, right? It knows that there's special characters that are assigned to spaces and tabs.
Right.
Which is why these people obsess to say, don't use a tab, use 4 spaces instead, which is, I know it doesn't, but most of these things are really tied to convention, right? So if you're running a team, a distributed team, you're writing code together, you'd have to agree, right? To say, when we're writing this Python code, we'll have to use either a tab or 4 spaces. This is how we are going to name variables. Anyway, so the other cool thing is you can auto-complete this thing once you already write it. So I'm just auto-completing here and then press enter and then it runs it for you. Yeah, so a combination of these two things become really useful, especially when you're in a hurry, right? You don't want to go to your IDE, you open it up and you're writing code. You can just go to maybe the interpreter and then try out code. Right, and then the installation process, so maybe this will apply to the Windows guru here. I was going to say we download, but what we can do is we can go to our course website, right? So if you go, the web page actually, if you go to list.unza.zm, sorry about that, let me just go to this, yeah. So if you go to list.unza.zm and then go to /button, so this is our de facto course web page, right? But I guess I need to create links here. But you'll notice that this is the thing I was talking about. It's quite long, but maybe you can just go here. List.unza.zm /tilde and then light on Piri. You should be able to, once you go to light on Piri, you should be able to find, unless if you've already downloaded Python, have you? Not yet?
I have.
Oh, you have Python. Okay,
Yeah.
then we don't have to waste time.
I can't check what version it is.
Oh, you can.
Okay,
Can't you start the interpreter though? I mean, but the thing with Windows is you need to do those environment variables things, so that won't work. Maybe go to start and then.
We'll
Maybe,
try if it doesn't.
no, that thing won't work, I'm sure. I would be surprised. That won't work. So unless if you go to the installed directory, but what you can do is go to start and then see the new installed programs, if you can, or you can search for Python maybe. Yeah, so if you click that 3.232-bit, yeah, that's the interpreter, I think. It will pop up the nice thing and then you can check. It will print, has it printed out the version? The version is at 3.7.2, which is fine. But at your own time, if you want to be able to run the Python, because you will need to, once we go through the process of installing those libraries, because we use pip, right? And so you need to run it as a command line kind of argument. So you'd have to do something similar to what I'm going to do just now. So if I wanted to install pandas, right? Now you can install pandas using apparently Anaconda happens to be one of those popular ways of doing it, because it installs like a band of these most popular data analysis tools, right? Data analysis / machine learning tools. But what we'll need to do ourselves, because we're interested in just restricted libraries, is we'll use a pip utility. So if I wanted to install pandas, I'll just say pip install pandas, and this is what happens, right? But because pandas is already installed in my case,
I installed Anaconda Navigator.
Okay, well, I don't know if that's the one, but it should be. I'm surprised that pandas was installed. I'm surprised it's installing here. But so we need to fix the environment variables, perhaps not today, but by Tuesday, by the Tuesday class, we need to do that. Okay. And then, I mean, we had a chat about this. I mean, it's always nice to talk about this, but maybe and we're not trying to start flame wars here on which IDE is the best, and people always argue over that, right? I'm surprised we haven't had people argue for, no, Java, not Python, right? But I thought this was an interesting, I don't know if you've come across this, right? It's probably one of the most popular Stack Overflow threads tied to the appropriate IDE to use for Python. If you look at this spreadsheet, this has like 1,200 upvotes, right? This spreadsheet will show you like a list of potential IDEs that exist out there, right? I'm happy to say VI, which I use, or Vim, and Wing 101, which I'm recommending if you want an IDE. It's really nice, user-friendly. They're on the list as well, right? So you will find Wing 101 in here. So if I go to this location here and then just say resources, I will find this. You want to, and what I did was I guess some people would have reached people with Macs, right? So we also have the Mac installed in case you want to, but you can download this, but in case you want to play around with it today just to see. So yeah, but I highly recommend Wing. I'm recommending Wing because I've taught Python using Wings to beginner programmers, right? First years anyway, but I'm sure there are better IDs. I think you said you have PyCharm, right? Yeah. It really doesn't matter what you use, whatever you fancy anyway.
No, it's a professional thing.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a community edition.
I think what I have is a community.
But they also say it's for the guys who want to do things fast. But
okay.
Not for learning maybe.
Okay. All right, so like in terms of the basics, and I mean, we're probably going to, stop me if you want to, if some things don't make sense. It would be nice. I think it's a smaller group so we can have a more meaningful conversation about some of these things we're going to talk about, in case you've poked around and you haven't been clear with certain things. But I'll mostly focus on things that I know are going to be useful once we start what we need to be doing, right? So things like the core data structures, right? Whilst you have a number of them, like you have your typical tuple, you have your list, you have your dictionary and your sets, but you notice that most of these libraries are going to use, like the pandas library, will mostly be working with lists and perhaps dictionaries, right? Key value pairs, it's your hash table. So just to remind us, we don't have to explicitly specify, because it's interpreted, we don't have to say, do what we do in same things we do in Java, like int x is equal to 2, right? No need. You just say x is equal to 2, and then Python automatically knows that it's an integer, right? And I always like, I'll discuss this function, but when you're in Python, right? When you're in Python, I always like, I use this a lot, and you probably need to figure out, you want to start learning how to use this type function. You've used a type function before? You have, right? It tells you what data structure, data type you're working with. So when we're using pandas, for instance, there will be series and there'll be data frames. So if something goes wrong, and or if you're trying to do something, maybe trying to invoke a function and you're wondering why you're unable to, it could be that maybe it's not a data frame actually, right? So a cheap trick to use is, so if this was maybe a pandas data structure, you just say run type, and then it tells you what type of thing, entity you're working with. It could be an integer, type string. This is a string. Type what data structure is this? Is a list. What data type is this? This is a set, right? What data type is this? This should be a hash table, right? It will tell you it's a dictionary, right? Right, so it's a very useful built-in function, and we'll look at the list of built-in functions just now. The other thing that you normally talk about when you're really trying to understand the programming language is this issue of identifiers. What I've discovered is that for most of these languages, actually, I'm yet to come across a language that has a completely different convention when it comes to naming variables, right? So most things that you have in Java are applicable here. So things like you cannot declare a variable that starts with a number. So we can't say 2 hello is equal to 5. It will present an error, because one of the rules when it comes to variable declaration, naming variables, is that it cannot start with a number, right? You can probably start with certain special characters like an underbar, right?
Yes.
So underbar hello is equal to 5. This will work, right? Yeah. So I mean, just certain things to look out for, right? So the rules are here. Yeah. Well, it's case sensitive, obviously. Age with lowercase is different from age with uppercase, or age, which is camel case, right? So you want to, these are things that you normally overlook when you're doing this for the first time, because you'll be wondering, what's going on here? When in actual fact, it could be like a typo, maybe your variable was used sentence casing, right? Which is also why coming up with a convention is really important. Like I use a convention where I always start with my variable, and you see this a lot. When I'm declaring variables, I always do var underbar and then the name of the variable, because what this does is it prevents me from making the usual mistakes people make, like using a keyword as a variable. It results in an error, right? Okay, so we can use letters, combination of letters, numbers, and underscore, right? We can't use other punctuations. This is, I don't know if Java is the same, right? So you cannot have, we can have var 1 is equal to 5 or is equal to 7. It will work, but we cannot have var hyphen, right? Yeah. This is an error because it says the only special character that's allowed is the underbar, right? We cannot. No.
It can also mean subtraction.
Sorry?
Maybe, yeah, that's also.
Oh yeah, exactly, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, but also you can't. Yeah, this can mean division. Yeah, so you can't.
Yeah.
Or you can't say this. I don't know if this is possible in Java or PHP. You can't say var $, that's an error. So the only, anyway, the key thing here is the only special character. If you're obsessed with naming your variables using special characters, just remember that the only punctuation you can use is an underbar or an underscore. So you can't start with a number, and you cannot use Python keywords, right? There are a few, there are only a few Python keywords here. Is it import keyword list? Is it keyword? Can't remember. I think there's a slide dedicated to this. So there's a way in which you can list all the Python keywords, but to explain this. So the assignment operator is obviously equal sign. This declares a variable, age, right? In which case age will be an int, right? Okay. So we have a few. Now here's a thing to note. We have a few variables here. So you cannot name your you cannot name your variables using any of these keywords here. So you cannot say none is equal to 2 because that's a keyword, right? And you notice that the total number of keywords in Python, it's just 33. But the interesting thing is if you were to use Python 2 or Python 2.7, I think Python 2.7 has I think Python 2.7 has a slightly less, I could be wrong here, but it should have slightly less number of keywords, right? 31. So 3 has, an extra 2 keywords or reserved words, right? So namings, you either use, I think this explains why you can't use something like a hash as well, right? Because this is used for commenting, obviously. So your hash is used for single line comments, right? Similar to your 2 forward slashes in Java, I guess. And you notice this is similar to most scripting languages like Bash, for instance, right? And then if you want to have multi-line comments, you use either 3 single quotes, 3 opening single quotes, and then your multi-line comments, and then 3 closing quotes. Or if you fancy double quotes, you do that. You notice that once we start looking at data types, this is similar to the way that you define strings. So if you want to declare a string, it's either you put it in single quotes or double quotes, right? But just bear in mind that for comments, it's 3 of them, yeah? And then in terms of the data types, I mean, so some of the data types. So integers, float would be like your decimal numbers, right? Strings, the usual Boolean, right? Easy stuff mostly self-explanatory, I guess. When we're discussing Boolean values, right? I don't know if I think I looked into this. I was trying to explain something to say, number one, the first thing to to remember here is that when you're declaring a variable, it's true with uppercase T and false with uppercase F, right? And these are all special or reserved keywords. So you cannot say X is equal to false like that. It's an error because we know that this thing is case sensitive. So it has to start with an uppercase X, and then you check your type, you know that it's Boolean, right? But I was also trying to, I remember at some point, I think in most of these things that you read online, they'll say any number other than 0 is true, right? Apparently. So when you're doing fancy condition checks, you can use that as, like, if a number is 0 and whatnot. So what they mean is if you were to run the Boolean function on, so any number other than 0 is true. So 0 is false, right? But 100 is true, right? 1 is true. I guess 1000 is true. -1 is true as well, right? So any number. Yeah, I don't know. It's the off switch, I guess. But so the other thing is, obviously, usually most people tend to use just 1 and 0 as it's like if you're flipping a switch to try and distinguish true or false, right? But just something to bear in mind. This is a condition that you can use. Yeah. But it's usually common for people to just say, if one, so if true, then print 4, right? In which case this will always print 4, right? But if we say if 0, right? If we say print 4 if 0, this 4 will never be printed, is it? Because this will always be false, yeah? So what we are saying is hopefully, and I guess there's another caveat here. You can't say if 100, by the way, and then you say 1, 2, 3, 4. You say print 4. I don't think this will work. Oh, it does work. Okay, this is 0. No. That's the thing. And we discussed it. This thing is based on indentation. The only thing you're using here is a full colon, right? To signal, say, yeah. I don't know if you've noticed something else. You've noticed something else that we'll discuss, and you must have picked it up when you were studying this. You don't terminate your statements, right?
Yeah.
There is nothing like semicolon and all those funny things, yeah. So.
But for grouping, you can use. Okay, depending on where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Maybe you have a long list of conditions. You want them so that you can easily read them.
Yeah.
There's not only one line, like there's not only one print line.
Yeah.
To know everything under it, you know the 400 that.
Yeah, but that's where indentation is key to Python. So this thing, right? If I said if 100, then print 4. You see, if I press enter here, it's thinking optionally I might want to have another line, in which case I'll have to do this, and then I'll just say also print strange, right? And then I'll press enter. It also think maybe I might still want to put things under this indentation, this if statement. But if I don't, I'll just press enter and then it just prints those. So everything is centered around indentation. This is key. Usually for Python, right, if you haven't played around with it for long, this is the one thing that you initially struggle with. But with time, it will become muscle memory. I mean, you just have to write maybe a few scripts over the weekend and then everything will be fine. Yeah. No, it doesn't work like that.
Just the 4 spaces.
Yeah.
So if you put more than 4, then it knows it's not.
So here's the thing. Look at this, right? If I said, because the indentation thing, right? If I said if 100, okay, I'll start with this. If 100, if I want to use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then say print 1, right? And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then I say print hello. This works, right? But look at what happens if I say 100, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then I say print 1, but I make the mistake of saying 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then say print hello. This will not work. This is where this convention thing I was talking about becomes really important, right? Yeah. Consistency is key. So if you if you are a tabs person, just say, going forward, I'll just start using tabs for indenting Python code and then just go with that. If you're a space person and you use 2 spaces instead of 4 or 3 spaces, just stick with that.
So like, okay, you know, what's the difference? When is it printing? When you press enter?
It's when you press enter.
When you press enter twice.
Or twice?
Yeah.
The first one, you might still be editing the script, so it will allow you to just come to the start of the line in some cases.
Also the enter part?
Now, if it's there, then it will execute.
But by the way, this is where your IDE or your text file, and I use Kate myself, and Kate is I don't know if, have you used Kate before? Wonderful text editor. It has everything. Look at this. I can write assembler code in here, and this is useful for me because I teach a computer system and computer architecture course, so I normally use this as an editor. I can write markup languages. These ASN.1, the person who's working in telecoms, I don't know if you still use ASN.1 format. I can write markdown using this, and it detects it, right? It's an intelligent, really useful. This is.
What's the name of the?
It's called Kate.
Kate.
Yeah, Kate. And for me, whenever I install Ubuntu, right, Kate is enough for me to do everything I want. When I'm teaching our list 5310 course and we're dealing with HTML and CSS, this is my go-to thing. Of course, I introduce students to things that are more user-friendly, but this is enough really. So I can tell it to say, I want to convert this into what? I want this to convert it into LOM in is it scripts here? I'm looking for Python. There we go. I can just tell it to say I'm going to be. So I first of all change the. Well, of course, I mean I don't have to explain this, but I changed the mode and the highlighting as well to Python and all that, and the indentation also, right? It already knows it's Python. So the moment I start writing for, and I should have changed the. I should change the highlighting as well so that it knows that this is a Python script. Python. The mode should be Python as well. Python. I'm wondering why maybe I should save it. I guess I'll save it as x.python. Very strange very strange name, but I'm wondering why it's not. It's supposed to. Is this already for x in? Oh, okay. It's already highlighting. That's good. So what I was trying to say is, for what we are doing here, instead of doing what I'm doing, this is a bad thing to do, right? Normally, when you're writing Python, you don't want to do this. You don't want to work in the interpreter. Especially when you start writing, when you start playing around with code that will require you to write more than 5 lines, you are better off using your IDE or your text editor. So in this case, we just say if 100, then. And here's the thing. This thing already indents it for me, and then I'll just say print 4, enter again, and then I'll just say print 100, and then I just save it, and then I'll start running the script itself, right? All right, so next up is this, you can't run away from functions here, right? Yeah?
Just like for Windows, if you store the Python file,
yes.
How do you access it from?
Yeah, this is the thing. This is where the environment variables become useful. So, like, you see what you installed. If you have PyCharm will be able to, because you configure PyCharm in a similar way as Wing IDE. So you specify where the Python interpreter is sitting. So with PyCharm, if you have it, right? So if you open there and just search for Python, start and then Python. In fact, we should do that right now as we're working through. So start menu and then just, or search for Python. Or if you have it on the desktop, maybe, I don't know. I think IDEs is also an IDE that most people use, so you can use that. So if this thing is automatically configured with the location of your interpreter, then what you can do once it starts up is you write your source code in this IDE, and then that's it. You save it somewhere, and then what else do you have?
I have PyCharm.
You have it?
Search for PyCharm.
Maybe search for charm or something. I don't know.
PyCharm. Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Oh, it comes with JetBeans. I didn't know that. So it's better you start using this because.
Okay.
But you want to use the interpreter, you open up that interpreter thing if you just want to, maybe you can have them all open. So in case you want to test simple statements, you do that, but yeah. So next up is something that is, and I want us to just spend a little bit of time just briefly here because you see when we start working with those libraries, the two things that we're going to be working with the most are what? The modules in those libraries and the functions in those modules, right? And perhaps once you start, working on those projects, you might want to define functions and whatnot, who knows, right? So we know what functions do here, right? They're used to perform, routine operations that we want to automate, right? And we do this so that we can reuse, right? So the way that you invoke your functions is similar to, well, I guess it's similar to Java in a way, right? So function name and then open parenthesis, optional values or actual values inside, and then you close the parenthesis. This is assuming you would have already defined the function called function _ name, which is why we were able to use this inbuilt function. I don't know if you remember, type is a function. It's an inbuilt function, right? So, and we know this because we can, I wonder if this way, can we run type on type? Yes. No. Oh, that's strange.
Yeah, it says the class.
Sorry? Yeah, but I was hoping it would say it's something like if we define a function x which takes in a variable x, y, I guess, and then we just say print y, right? And then we call x with 5, and then we say type x. You see, this is what I was expecting. I wanted us to, but I guess it's because we're doing like a recursive call where we say type, but maybe if we said, nah, still. I was expecting running type on type to return function like it did here. Okay. but anyway, I thought, but I was using type as an example. Type is a function, right? Len is a function. These are all inbuilt functions. So length, what is the length of this, right? It tells you that. There are a number of inbuilt functions, by the way. So you pick them up as we go along. Plenty of useful utilities that you want to use, right? As you are running these programs. Some functions will not take in parameters, in which case you invoke them like so. Some of them will have parameters, in which case you need to feed them with actual values, right? Some of them will have optional parameters, in which case you can run the function with missing parameters. A classic example of something that we've already started using is, I don't know if you remember this, guys, print, right? So I kept on saying print 5, for instance, right? It turns out print takes in a number of parameters. Useful parameters, by the way, if you are performing some sort of fancy things here. Like, for instance, if I didn't want to use the default end parameter as a new line, because every time I run print here, if I print 5, it will print 5 and then automatically go to the new line. But what if I said I want to print 5, but instead the end parameter will be, let's say 3 equal signs. This is what happens. You notice that this prompt here, these 3 greater than signs, is it greater than less than? I don't know, forgotten my maths. Yeah, they'll come right after the printout. Now, when you're doing some processing here, this is something that you might want to use, I guess, who knows, right? So you notice something else here. If you run help here, there are other useful things like the separator, because you can print, you just don't print one value, you can print multiple values. So I can say I want to print a list, and then I also want to print my set, right, which has 4 and 5, right? It will print them out. But you notice that by default, it's separating these entities that I'm splitting with what? Space. So you can tell the print function to say I want to use the separator to be what? Maybe yeah, those things, and then it will do that. These are all useful things. It's something that you can use when you're processing data, for instance, and you know, the things that we do and say it's a comma separated file, but because of the confusion when we're working with open text, you say, I want to use this. I like using the vertical bar as a separator, especially when I'm working with textual content. You say you're extracting abstracts where people have commas in there, right? You can't use a comma as a separator. You want to use something else. So when you're using your print statements, it's something that you could take advantage of. Who knows? Right? Yeah, so you know, I was using the print command here to show that it has optional parameters. Right, so we also said there are a number of built-in functions, right? Some useful things, print, classic ones that you might use often. Print, if you're writing an interactive command line program, input is quite useful, right? So the same thing, I don't know if it's read line in Java. What do we have in Java?
Yeah, read line.
Is it? So if you were creating a simple application that will prompt someone to, let's say, please enter the first number. You remember those simple programs they were telling us, enter number 1, right? This is what you do, right? And then it will prompt you like that, and then I'll say 5. So this 5 is going to be in X. Yeah, but here is where the help thing becomes useful, right? This whole notion of return values that we'll explain at some stage. Does it say here? I was so hoping it would. It doesn't say. This is sad. I was so hoping you to tell us the data type that is returned by input. This is something that new, especially people that are working with numbers, that they get confused about. The input function returns a string, which is why this 5 is in quotes. So if you're manipulating, so if you said you are prompting a user to enter a number X, he enters 6, and then you say Y is equal to number 2, right? And then you say, let's say I'll enter 7. If you make the mistake of assuming that X and Y are automatically integers, that would be a big mistake, because when you say X plus Y, look at what happens. What do you think will happen if we say X plus Y?
27.
No, 67. Because it's concatenating the strings. Yeah, so what you want to do is you want to cast those things, right? I guess you can easily cast them with, so you could just say, I wonder if we can do a replacement of X, casting X to be an integer, right? And then cast Y to be an integer as well. In which case, it replaces the value. In which case, when we run now X plus Y, it gives us what we want. So something to kind of remember here as we are. I don't know if this will come up a lot, but hey, just in case, right? These are things you want to avoid spending hours on, not hours. You know, the obsession where you're doing something and you can't figure out what is wrong, right? What is wrong? You're getting the wrong answers, but these are cheap. I mean, this is normally simple mistakes you'd be making here. All right, in terms of the data structures, I mean, these are the core data structures that you want to kind of pay particular attention to. Tuples, lists, and dictionaries. Choose your hash table, key value pairs, and then sets. I was mentioning in the other group that in the years that I've used Python, I've actually only extensively used these 3 things. Yeah, and I always failed to give an example of where sets would become useful, right? But the things to note here is a tuple is immutable, right? Meaning that when you create a tuple like this, you cannot change it, right? Obviously, that means efficiency, right? So if you're looking at, because whatever you can do with a tuple, you can do it with a list. You can iterate through a tuple, you can iterate through a list, right? You can iterate through a string as well. You can iterate through a dictionary. But given the option of using a list and a tuple, remember that this is more efficient than this, because this is immutable, right? So you want to always remember that. and yeah, so this key value pair thing will come up a lot in pandas especially. So I already gave examples of iterating through a thing, but let's create our simple dictionary here called call it verdict, I guess. And then we'll say the key 1 maps to 100, the key 2 maps to 200. So in as much as we can say for I in verdict, for instance, sorry, in. So in as much as we can say for I in verdict and then print I, you notice that something to pay particular attention to when you're working with dictionaries, what you are printing when you iterate through a dictionary are what? The keys, right? So if you want to print the values, know that you call that data structure, in this case verdict, and then you use the keys here as the index. So the I. Oh, sorry about that. So we'll iterate through this, and then instead of printing I, we'll print the dictionary, but we use the I, which are the keys, as the, to iterate through the dictionary so that we print the corresponding values. Right? Just something to bear in mind here. Maybe it would have been nice if at some stage we had, I wanted to include like examples of sorts, but I thought just running through this and then most of the exercises, I'll go back to slide 21, most of the exercises will come when we start going through the libraries themselves, because at this stage, I thought we'd cruise through the basics of Python just to give us an idea of what to expect, and then immediately transition to see how the modules work, and then we move to why we're doing this course in the first place, right? Right, so data structures, and then loops, obviously, of course you have your usual do-while loops, and I guess you should have switch statements as well, but I just thought I'd highlight these popular looping courses.
A traditional for loop.
Sorry?
Do we have the traditional for loop
This.
where you, not that one.
Which one?
You know the I equals 1.
Yeah, but this is the thing here. So this is as traditional as you get in Python. So there's no, but there's no point in doing for var is equal to thing because you don't.
There's something I was going to look for. It was some logical calculation I needed.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mean like things like the I plus plus and the what?
So I was supposed to do the range and then start now.
Yes, so this is where the built-in functions like the range come in, by the way. Yeah, so you start using those things, or you can build the logic within the for loop body itself. I guess there are always things that you give up in some of these things, right? Yeah. But the takeaway point here is when you're looping, when you're using these looping constructs, it's a full colon, which is part of the syntax, the keyword for, right? And what you're iterating through, and then the indentation. That's all you need to know, right? And then so this was supposed to be part of the other function thing here, but the way that you define functions, it's easy. I guess it's important because we'll be defining functions. So it's a keyword def, right? It's the function definition. Oh, hi. Do you need your cable?
Sorry?
You need your cable or something?
No, I just came to observe the session.
Oh, you want to join us? Yeah. Sorry, so this is Pierre. Pierre is a member of staff in the department as well. I told him we had this session and I thought it would be nice if he came in as well. And who knows? It's always nice to, yeah. So thanks, which is nice. Usually I think our Tuesday sessions are going to be more interactive. People have already confirmed participation, especially the talks. I'm really looking forward to the talks. Especially Francis. You know why I'm looking forward to Francis' talk? Mm-hmm. He's still carving out his research, and I'm really curious to find out how he's going to train his data set, how he's going to collect his data sets. These insects, right?
Okay.
Yeah? Because there's so many potential confounding factors, like at what level are you going to zoom so that you get the features that you want, right? How many images of these armyworms are you going to have to get for you to come up with? It's hard. It's not like you're dealing with number plates, or people's faces.
First of all, do we even have armyworms? to train our application from?
They're working with people from entomology, and they collect a lot of these experimental insects. So I'm sure they
already
have
them.
yeah, I think they have a farm of armyworms or something. I don't know. Yeah. So we're just looking through Python here. Really, most of it is not going to be that useful. But so the function definition is a keyword def, which is part of those 33 keywords, and then followed by the name of the function, and then opening parentheses your optional parameters. Again, you can have named parameters. Now, the beauty with named parameters is they will ensure that you have a default value associated with that parameter. So if I observe, if I said I wanted to define a function x that's going to add two numbers, a and b, typically you'd feed a and b as being 1, 2, 3, 4, return a plus b, right? Typically you would say, if I do this, right, and if I call, I would have to always call x with actual values, right? So 1 and 2. But observe what happens if I define a similar function y and say a is equal to 1, b is equal to 3. These are named parameters, and I do the same thing. I return a plus b. I can now call y without anything. It becomes useful, really. And the same trick can be applied to classes as well, like those constructors we're talking about. Yes. So the print by default, the print by default has, look at this, the print by default has, it has, this is what tells us it's a named parameter, right? Separator has a default value, end has a default value, file has a default value, right? If you want to write the output to file instead of, by default by default, the output comes to standard output, right? Which is the console, but you can change file to, let's say, an actual file on the file system, let's say text file. So instead of like spitting out the output on this terminal, you can write it to file. It becomes useful, I guess. Yeah, so evocation here kind of straightforward. And then the return is obviously optional. We know this. If you use the return keyword, then you're going to return a data type, right? Specific data type. And it's implied, right? Depending on what you're processing. So I wonder, right? I've never tried this before, but what if we said we wanted B to always be a string, right? Which is that. And we return this. The data type in this case is always going to be what? It's it'll be a string, right? Oops. I was hoping type would return, now would have to say x is equal to that. No, why?
No, it's the calculation. You're adding a string and
so one of them would have to be converted. Right, okay. My mistake. I was trying to see if the data type would be implied. Okay. But we know what's happening, you know. Right. Now, I've been in sessions where I've spent maybe a couple of minutes. What's going on? And there's something wrong with me, right? I can't let go sometimes. So always want to. I think it's a problem common with most people that have done programming, right?
yeah.
Yeah. And then the other important thing, PL, out of interest, you've done Python before, right?
I used Python. That was in 2000.
Okay. So it's a good thing anyway. So the other useful thing is this whole notion of modules, right? And this is going to be really useful once we start using the pandas library. Now, mistake people make is conflating libraries and Python. We'll be using the matplotlib library. Within the matplotlib library, there are modules. Then within those modules, you have functions. And the modules really are nothing more. We know what modules do, but the interesting thing with modules in Python is these are just .py files. So if you open up the source code of those .py files, you notice that there'll be a whole range of functions in those modules, right? But the takeaway point for modules, for the purposes of what we're doing, is that the way that you use modules is you use the import function, or the import keyword, right? So we have an example of the math module, right? It's a classic here. So if we wanted to use, we cannot, there's no inbuilt square root function, right? So we'd have to, if we wanted to do a square root, we'd have to import math, right?
Yeah.
And then we'd call the square root function here. So the square root of 9 is 3 here, right? Another thing to note here is you notice that the explanation says we can import using two different methods. So if you're not happy with saying, with using the fully qualified math.function name, so module.function name, you can just say from module, right, math import square root, in which case you now use square root like you would use the built-in functions, right? Now, this is an issue of style and convention. If you are a person who's comfortable with this, just go with this. If you are used to fully qualifying your functions, then just use the import thing, right? Something else to remember is when you use something like you'd use the from convention or method to import everything that exists in the math function. So you use asterisks. So in this case, I will have access to, hopefully there's cosine or something, I don't know. Yeah, so I'll have cos. Now, I feel bad, my math is gone now. I don't know what cosine of 90 is, I don't know. But yeah.
Revise this. So now,
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I know the import math
Yeah.
will require me to qualify my package, my module name.
Right.
Is the module a package?
Yes, it's similar to a package.
The other will
Yes, it's a package.
So, that one is straightforward. I can have different packages with the same function.
Right.
Because I'll qualify what I'm calling.
Yes.
So what happens if I do math, if from math import square root, then maybe from another...
Yeah, that's so. This is the thing. This is where another use case where you would have to use the other method where you have like the fully qualified name. Or this is something that will come up a lot in pandas and matplotlib. There are certain conventions. If you start reading, what do you call this? If you start reading app tutorials online, you notice that people will say import. So instead of math, if you wanted to import the math package, if you wanted to use the dot convention, which is how pandas and matplotlib is used, by the way, including scikit-learn actually. What you'd have to do is, what most of these tutorials will do is, instead of saying math, if it's a long name, you just say empty as empty. Okay. Right? And then if there's another package that has this in, so you'd be calling the functions in math package using the MT. So for pandas, for instance, most people say import pandas as PD, right? And I don't know if I have pandas here. Yeah, I have pandas. Right, so you start calling the, yeah, so you give it an alias, right?
All right.
Yeah. All right. So now that I guess this was enough for a crash course. I don't know if you want us to if you have questions, things that we can revise, but because what we did last time is because of these invited talks that are coming, I gave a trial of what to expect, and I like calling this a shameless plug. It's one way of making sure that people listen to me talk about and rant about some of the things I do, right? I did this on Tuesday, I did it on Wednesday with our 5310 class. I did it now. I'm thinking of giving the same talk to, I just realized that I've not given this talk to my colleagues in the department, in fact, people in the school. And I always feel bad that our department is always at the tail end, right? We are the only department last year which never organized any seminar, which is disappointing. We always organized workshops, right? We always brag that we make a lot of money, but we don't do what we are hired to do. I mean, some of the things we are hired to do. So if there are no questions, I'm suggesting that we jump part 2 and like we did last time, and we go to part 3, where I'll give this academic talk. I think it's enough of the practical session. We've been at it for about an hour and a half or something. I think it's enough for like an initial introduction. Unless if people want us to experiment with specific modules and whatnot, we can transition to the talk, right? Yeah, we transition to the talk, and the expectation for the talk, like we said, is the reason we're doing this is because there are marks associated with attendance and participation. So you want to make sure that whoever is coming on Tuesday, once they give this talk, for us to get part of those 5% and whatnot, we must participate, right? Right. Okay, so I'm just going to give this so-called talk of mine. you notice from my UNZA web profile that I'm obsessed with. Now I know that solving world hunger is important, but I'm not interested in that myself, unfortunately. Unfortunately, and I know that networking is important. I have this. I guess Josiah has become somewhat of a friend. He's obsessed with software-defined networks. So he's become so engrossed in networking, right? But I've categorically told him, say, I have zero interest in networking. The only networking I did was Cisco, right? That thing that is, and that's it for me. I mean, I can troubleshoot and whatnot, but I don't want to go beyond that. I don't know why. I'm just not. Maybe, I mean, because yeah, I guess. I mean, you can't do it all. You can't do everything. You have to be selective with it. But because I have an interest, if you look at my profile page, my research interest, you notice that I've snuck in things like ICT4D, and when you start talking about ICT4D, it's broad, right? So you might want to maybe experiment with certain, like, I mean, there are times when I've looked into things like off the grid, you've heard of things like OpenBTS, where people create, you must have heard of OpenBTS, where you can create off the grid networks, right, using open source kind of infrastructure. Right, so you can set up like a small telecommunications type setup in a village network, so that you connect a village to a nearby clinic, a nearby church. These are things you should be doing. If you read up on, if you search on what Project Matcha has been doing, they've experimented with OpenBTS, and in fact, MIT has done. There's a lab in MIT that has done extensive research on this. They went to Papua New Guinea. What I found interesting was I think they also experimented with data, right? Where you build a low-cost network, which is self-sustaining actually, because it turns out people have done research. You know that, and I also know this because I worked for Airtel. Most calls that are made from people that are located close to each other. So you live in Lusaka, you call people that are in Lusaka most of the time. So it makes no sense that you introduce these off-the-site grid networks to these places, right? And then, I mean, you can introduce value-added services as off-net type networks, where you have your off-grid network connect to Airtel. And there's nothing novel about this, really. People have done, I mean, we already know the solution, right? But if you're the one who is interested in potential research area, by the way, seeing as you're a network kind of person, but if you're one interested in doing this, you can experiment with it. Yeah. But this is one of the things I obsess about, right? I feel bad, and I obsess about this because I'm an academic, and I feel bad that I look at the publication landscape, really, and insofar as online visibility of research is concerned, Zambia, Africa, and the so-called global south, they're always at the tail end, right? And so as motivation, apparently, Zambia has a total of 66 institutions of higher learning. These are universities, right? Degree offering institutions. So 6 of these are so-called public institutions of higher learning, right? And the 60 private institutions of higher learning. Now, Ms. Dokowe, who is like assistant librarian for ZCAS apparently is now ZCAS University, corrected me when I gave this talk to say ZCAS should be part of this because it's a state-owned kind of thing. So it turns out then we should, sorry? NIPA as well. But NIPA is not classified as, it's not on the list. It's not, so these 66 are the ones that have been accredited with the Higher Education Authority. I don't think NIPA is on the list yet, but they should because they've started offering degree programs, right? But the interesting thing is, if you look at the corresponding online visibility of research, when you look at these 66 universities, it's depressing, right? You look at places like Zambia Open University, go to their publications page, you don't have to take it from me, we can go here right now. It's really depressing, right? Zao.
Yeah. And I think for some of this, the private ones,
yeah,
the problem is, one of the problems
yes,
is that they don't really have members of staff of their own to do it. Most of the people teach there from the...
Right. And rightfully so, because their core focus, unlike this, you notice just now that we actually explicitly state that our focus for part of the analysis that we conducted was really on the public institutions of higher learning because they are mandated by law to conduct research. And if you conduct research, you must show us some of the outputs, and the outputs come in the form of publications in part, right? So if you go to Zambia, maybe things have changed here, but if you look at the, and it's even gone, maybe library publications, can you see maybe thesis publications? If we say thesis publications and go to PhD here, last time I checked it had nothing here, but yeah, there's nothing. There we go. If you go to School of Agriculture, there's nothing here. But I will tell you this, right? Now I have an uncle of mine who got his master's degree at Zambia Open University. He did, there's a lot of interest. Is it Zambia Open University or University of Lusaka? I don't know. I think it's Zambia Open University. So he graduated, he wrote a dissertation. But the question is, where is that dissertation? It's not online, right? It's part of Square output that we expect to find online, like the UNZA has done, like CBU began at some stage and stopped, right? You must archive that, right? When you submit that thesis of yours, it might take time, but you take it to DRGS, and then DRGS will take it to the library, they'll upload it online, and then people will see it online, right? A couple of years from now, when you become maybe a politician, in case people say, no, but where did you go to school? You just point them to the dissertation, right? This is the beauty, I guess. Yeah, so this is the motivation, right? It's one of the motivation for us. And really, we are really more focusing on the 7 institutions of higher learning. It's not 6 now, it's 7. But it gets even more depressing, right? When we look at the global landscape here, people talk a lot about this. I mean, there have been radio talk shows where people are saying, people that don't understand how academia works. Why is it that the University of Zambia is number 2,000, number 4,000, right? Part of the reason is because we are not making available our research output online. Because if you look at the markers, the metrics that are used to measure these things, right? For most of these most of these platforms that rank universities, they in part look at your research output, right? Which is why you find Mulungushi is number 14,000 in the world, right? Depressing. We have less than 200 states, right? So-called countries in the world. So if you're number 14,000, then there's a problem right there, right? Not only that, I mean, if you crawl through some of these popular academic portals that aggregate content, as an example, the Union Catalog, what the Union Catalog does is it automatically harvests dissertations from around the world, universities around the world, and then they list the total number of dissertations from the master's and PhD thesis and master's dissertations from around the world, right? But if you look at the representation on such portals, man, Zambia is underrepresented, right? When we have 66 universities. Even better when you really try and look at, I guess, look at this problem from a different perspective, and you narrow down on ETDs. This chart here was extracted, was generated from OATD. You want to look at this. What OATD does is something similar to Union Catalog. They automatically harvest ETDs from around the world. Now what this image is showing us, by the way, is that it's showing us, number one, the global picture based on continents, right? Europe, North America, South America, Asia, Australia, right? And then Africa here. And the other thing that I always say when I give these talks is left is good, right is bad, and then top is good, bottom is bad. Now Africa ticks all those bad things here. Africa is here. Africa is bad throughout, right? We're at the tail end, right? It's always the case here. Now that's Africa here, right? We're at the tail end. But if you look at the size of Africa relative to these other continents, I mean, come on, right? Not only that, I mean, because our context here is Zambia, if we drill down into Africa, you notice that this is Africa, but a large proportion of this Africa content is coming from South Africa, right? And then, you have to squint here. This is South Africa, this is Ghana, this is Ethiopia, this is Zambia, this is Algeria, this is Namibia, this is, I don't know what this is, but this is, at the bottom is Zimbabwe here. But again, left is good, right is bad. top is good, bottom is bad. Zambia, we are here, we're not that bad because we are not, this is really bad. Zimbabwe is really bad, but Zambia, we're not that bad, but still.
That image is to scale.
Sorry?
That image is to scale.
It is to scale. It's to scale, like relative to the number of dissertations, master's dissertations and PhD dissertations.
Zambia doing master's and PhDs.
Yeah.
Compared to South Africa.
Right.
We just can't compare.
Right. That is true. That is true. That is true.
But I'll add mine very soon.
Yes, we should. So that's Zambia over there. So what we set out to do really is to, having noticed this problem, what we set out to do was, number one, to empirically determine just this whole online visibility problem, right, in Zambia specifically. And usually our approach is usually not just focused on saying this is the problem, right? Oh, no, you're not putting on your shoes right. That's not enough. You must show people to say this is what you're supposed to do. So we did two things. We went out there and kind of empirically showed the extent of the problem, and I'll explain what we did. And then the other thing we did is kind of highlight some of the potential software-centric solutions that we can adopt to try and solve this problem, right? These software-centric solutions take the form of projects that we've been a part of and initiatives that we've kind of initiated to try and increase the online visibility of scholarly output in Zambia, not just UNZA, right? So in terms of the methodology, what we did was we did a content analysis of these so-called institutions of higher learning, and we did it in two phases. So we analyzed the metadata, right, associated with these digital contents, these PDFs that you download, the PhD thesis and the master's dissertation, the PDFs. PDFs will have corresponding metadata. This is descriptive, we know what it is. Descriptive information about the dissertation, for instance. Who authored it? The abstract that kind of tells you what the dissertation is about instead of you actually downloading the document and reading it, right? The subject category it falls under. Those were the elements, the metadata elements we're interested in analyzing. So we harvested everything, right? And I explained how we did that. But we went a step further and actually harvested the actual PDFs, the bit streams, right? Because, so when you look at these digital objects, the way they are kind of ingested and kind of structured in these tools, these digital libraries or institution repository tools, or repository software tools, is you not only ingest the PDF documents, but corresponding metadata. And usually it's standard practice now actually. The bit streams are stored on the file system, so the PDFs are stored in the file system, and then the metadata is in the database for obvious reasons. This is structured, right? So it's faster to create structured information if you store it in a database, right? So we collected the PDFs, and I'll explain why we were forced to harvest the PDFs here. And then we also kind of highlight the tools. Mostly they take the form of open source platforms, so software tools that we've been software tools that we've been a part of insofar as development is concerned, and then some freely available open source platforms that we are kind of reusing, right? So in terms of the metadata here, the way the metadata is stored in these institutional repositories, by default they use a metadata scheme called Dublin Core, right? One of the most popular metadata schemes actually, and rightfully so. It has two important characteristics, right? That makes it more attractive. So they say it's repeatable and it's optional. So it's repeatable in that even though there are just 15 metadata elements, and these are the metadata elements we're referring to, title, creator, subject, but these are optional and repeatable. They're optional because you can choose to ingest your dissertation and just tag it with just the title. No one cares, right? So it's optional. It's repeatable. You can have the same element, like subject here, defined multiple times, right? And the cool thing is it comes with a version called Qualifying Dublin Core, which further allows you to to provide like an in-depth description of the metadata element. So for instance, if it's a dissertation, the expectation is you must indicate who the supervisor or the supervisors were, right? People want to know, or which department you're a part of. But if you look at the 15 tags, none of them will actually tell you. You'll be forced to use creator, but for you to distinguish the person who wrote the dissertation, who is a student from the supervisor, used qualified Dublin core, right? So you could say you're going to use contributor.supervisor, right? Or creator.author, right? Or something like that. Right, so this is a process we went through in the detailed process. We harvested them. We used OI PMH protocol. And I thought this talk would be important because some of the those mini projects we're going to do will actually involve us using OI PMH if you choose to work on a problem that requires you to harvest content from these sort of software tools. It's an easy process, I assure you. Very easy, and quite easy to automate. And then we used ORE to harvest the PDF documents. It's an automated process, actually. A combination of you using like the resumption token and the list records verb for IPMH, right? IPMH comes with, is it 5 verbs or something? So identify, list verb, let me just show you just now. It comes, so if we wanted to automatically extract content from the UNZA repository, it's as easy as just saying OAI, not OAI. So this is, so the identify verb will show you a description of what the repository is about, right? So this is the UNZA repository. It's just a description of the repository.
So this is public?
Yeah, this is public information. And then so the list records now will start listing the records for you, right? This is probably what's going to be very useful. And then you can start harvesting the individual records. But the harvesting, for performance reasons, the harvesting is done in such a way that you use it in conjunction with a resumption token. So you're given batches of records. It's 100 at a time. So you have to loop through the resumption token, right? You get 100 records, you loop through the resumption token, you get the next 100 records. Now this becomes useful also if you're looking at building aggregate services, which I'll describe just now, because your aggregate, so this is the list records thing, which will let you list the actual individual records like this. This is what you'd be interested in harvesting, right? So I'll explain why the resumption token becomes useful, and I guess I could talk about it just now. So if you're thinking of building an aggregate service, for instance, like we are proposing in the next couple of slides, where we are saying we'll set up this portal that will automatically harvest ETDs from Mulungushi, from UNZA, from CBU, from Cavendish, all over, all the 66 actually institutions of higher learning. So we use OIPMH, but when you harvest from UNZA, you need a way of trying to tell the aggregate service to say, I already harvested the batch of records that falls within this range, right? Yeah, so you just get records that you haven't harvested before. They're cheap tricks to do that. And incidentally, we've set up a subject repository that does that as well. I'll explain. I worked with a group of 5 smart students that helped set up the repository. Now, in terms of the results, right, the content analysis, it's depressing, really. You notice that from a very high level in terms of the number of content, this was as of, is it November or December or something of 2018, we only had 4,863 digital objects in the UNZA repository. We had shocking just 168 objects in the CB repository, right? Doesn't make sense. And you soon realize why this was the case, right? They stopped ingesting content in 2014, so they haven't uploaded anything since 2014. The interesting thing is when I presented this at ICICT last year, we had colleagues from CBU, right? And I think it was nice, and we also had people from Mulungushi. It was nice that they were around, and hopefully they probably went and spoke to management, and who knows, maybe we'll see a change soon, which we should. So, and even so even though only 2 of them have digital objects, the other 6 here have nothing. There's 0. There's nothing. We don't know where Chalimbana is putting their things here. Yeah, you know why? You know why? We had a workshop. I'm working with Abel Mkulama. Abel is obsessed with open access. So last year what we did was we started, and it's actually listed as one of like what we're working towards, like future work. We're engaging stakeholders. So what we did last year was we had talks with Higher Education Authority. We presented to management. They don't seem interested anyway. But we also conducted a workshop where we had people from Mulungushi. So people from Mulungushi sent someone from IT and the library, and then we had people from Chalimbana. The last time we spoke to them, that was in December, the last time we spoke to them, that was early this year, we were told that they had set up a sandbox and they were just waiting to commission it. So which is why they now have a disk-based repository. But anyway, so even the repositories that have content, right, that have established repositories, you notice that there's noticeably low content. Come on, you can't tell me that from the time CBU came into existence, you only have 168 digital objects. Now, these 168 digital objects are supposed to be a combination of what? Preprints, right? So academics that are hired by CBU will write papers, right? Because they're promoted based on how much you publish. Those papers, ideally, are supposed, the preprint versions are supposed to be uploaded in the repository. Not only that, masters and PhD students graduate, their ETDs are supposed to be in here. So we expect more content. Not only that, fourth year students do capstone projects. Reports are supposed to be here. Now, if you look at the UNZA repository, for instance, you notice that it has, if we just go to dspace/XML UI, the UNZA institutional repository, now I feel embarrassed really. There's some content which is not supposed to be there. The reason we have 4,000 objects or more, maybe it's 5,000 now, is because UNZA has decided to even dump, shockingly, no university around the world will put, look at this. You will never find a repository, a well-established repository around the world that does this insane thing here. This should not be the case. Oh, they've stopped actually. This should not be there. This is misplaced. This is supposed to be scholarly output. You're not supposed to put examination papers in here. It's supposed to have a separate platform. So what they do is every time you write an exam, if you want to look at past exam papers, this is where to go, by the way. Oh. They digitize them. So when you're invigilating an exam hall, they'll tell you bring extra copies that you send to the library, and the library scans them. That's stupid, really. I thought they would just ask you to send an electronic copy, which would be searchable, right? Yeah. So they'll scan it and then they'll dump them here.
What are we doing about our repository here?
So UNZA has gone a step further. The library has now created the position of IR manager, and he seems enthusiastic. And actually, some of the things wild ideas that we have, we've been trying to see how best we can engage him. Very soon, I was talking to him about potentially making it slightly beautiful. Now, compare and contrast this thing here. And customization of these tools, by the way, is quite simple, right? Compare and contrast what we are looking at here, and by the way, there are websites that rank repositories as well around the world. So just Google up repository rankings, and you look at really beautiful repositories that use the same type of tool that have been customized to look nice, right? Branding. Look at UCT. If you look at UP's repository as well, or Sun Scholar, which is Stellenbosch University, you notice that it looks much better. And customization is quite simple, right? So I'll give you an example of what. And I'm sorry I veered off from the talk here, but I thought we still have time so I can rant and talk about some of these crazy things. So last year I worked with a student, a bunch of students that set up a subject repository. And I know, I mean, in terms of graphics, it's pretty trivial, but at least in my opinion, now I'm biased here, but it looks much better than the UNZA repository, right? Well structured. Compare and contrast, not just the look and feel, the aesthetics, but organization of information, right? When we're saying we're organizing our information based on subject categories, these are clearly and well-defined subject categories, right? Compare them with what you have here. How could you possibly have a subject as being first semester, second semester exam, right? It shows you that the little thought has been given into tagging these documents, right? And this, people might not know this, but this has implications in the findability of this information. Not everyone is interested in searching for content in the repository. Say I come here and then I type in this search bar to say I'm looking for that. Maybe I am in year number 2 and I'm doing this master's in computer science thing. And now, and I'm studying, maybe I'm studying data mining. I want to find keywords that are related to data mining. But anyway, if you are interested in this sort of area like information retrieval, but not really technical type stuff, this is something you'd look at, right? Right, so a closer look at this content analysis thing tells you a lot about why we have this situation. So specifically, like the CBA already highlighted the fact that there was a gradual decline here, right? You start out high and then you start declining and then you stop. There's no supervision here, right? Usually when they're not looking, when the boss is not looking, you stop and then boom, it's dead. For the UNZA, you notice that there are peaks and troughs here, right? What this is telling us is that the ingestion is done in batches, and it's done in batches because there is no self-archiving. So what happens is when you write your dissertation, you cannot, ideally this tool is designed in such a way that you should log in, upload your dissertation, maybe someone approves it, your supervisor say this can be uploaded. But the process now, it's stupid really. They tell you, put your dissertation on a CD. Who does that in 2019, right? You burn a CD, you take it to DRGS, and then DRGS has a backlog, right? At some stage, DRGS will walk to the library and say, these are the CDs, and then the library will take the content, and then when they open up your dissertation, for instance, they'll have to now go through the painful task of tagging that content. Usually they'll look at the abstract. So these people in the library are trained to classify documents, right? But there's a problem, by the way, because these are not subject librarians. They don't know the classification of computer science literature, for instance. They don't know that you must use classic classification schemes like the CCS, right? The SCM computer classification system, for instance. What they do is they use the default Library of Congress classification scheme, which is not at all useful, right? Tons of problems here, especially that people are harvesting automatically content from here, by the way. OATD automatically harvests content from here. The Union Catalog automatically harvests content from here, right? So these peaks here is because there's a bottleneck, right? The library is overwhelmed. Apparently, surprise, surprise, there are only just 2 people that do this, right?
No.
Yeah. So some of the things that we noticed, and I'm highlighting this because this year I intend to work, the 4th year students I'm working with are going to work on some of these problems, right? There's lack of use of controlled vocabularies. You know,
It's all free text.
yes, someone from VET uses a specific controlled vocabulary set that is VET-centric. The same goes for people in mining and engineering, computer science, education. We're not taking this into account, we're just generalizing things, right? Which is why when you look at that subject panel on the UNZA repository, it has funny things, right?
I think maybe they've just made a standardized form. Just
Yeah.
one form for everything.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Of documents, instead of saying, okay, this is the
Yeah. And for some of these things, right, guys, you know, there are simple solutions. You can just create a simple Google form to have you submit your dissertation via Google form, where the form will have you drop down, say, I'm in computer science, and then it automatically populates subjects associated to computer science. If you don't have the money at DRGS to hire someone who's going to do that for you, or if you are the librarian and you don't have the money to do that, there's simple solutions, right? And we know it's simple because it's been done elsewhere, and we know we can do this, right? Right, and then missing metadata, this is a big one, especially when it comes to metadata elements like, I'll take you back to this thing here. You see this element called type, very important, right? It's very important because a platform like OATD, for instance, once it harvests it, because they classify that content as being either a master's dissertation or a PhD thesis. Now, if you don't specify here to say PhD thesis, at UNZA, by the way, when you're doing a research-only master's, you apparently generate what they call a thesis. It's supposed to be a tenet, but I think it's just become tradition now. It's no longer a tenet. The things that I sat in there was nothing novel about what was being described. So it's not a tenet, it's not a thesis, dissertation, it's discourse, right? But because this is not really taken into account, you find that there's misclassification of the content that's automatically harvested, right? Sadly, as a library, because they don't have expertise, they don't know the implications of what they're doing now. They don't even know that there are people that, or there are other systems that are automatically harvesting content on a daily basis, actually, right?
And plus ranking us.
Yeah. So what we found in terms of missing data elements here is only 38% of ETDs were classified into their types, whether it was master's or PhD. By the way, which is why we were forced to. So when we discovered this, when we mined this data, what we did was, these are simple, cheap tricks that you can use, right? Get the dissertation, download it. The process went to download the dissertation, chop off the first page, which is the title page, because surprise, surprise, the title page will have what? a dissertation submitted for the qualification of Masters of Science in blah, blah, then we know that this is a Masters, right? And we can do the same thing for, I'll show you like towards the end for conclusion and future work. I say we want to automatically classify these things. If we want to include supervisors because they're missing these tags, we can just maybe go to, is it page 2 or 3? And we can use the simple, is it bag of words they call them, right? So we stem the text content once we do, I guess, PDF to text, and then slot in the things we're interested in the bag of words and then do an analysis, which words correspond to supervisor. Cheap tricks we can use, nothing difficult about it, right? But the other big one is self-archiving, and I've mentioned this, it doesn't exist. So people, scholars in the School of Education, don't even know that they can log in here and submit on their own. Submit work they've done, right? And people have woken up now because they know that not doing this has implications on your H index. So a lot of them are flocking to the library now. Which is why I was saying I should probably give this talk to the school at some stage so that I try and highlight some of these things, right? Who knows, maybe we can catch a few fishes, but...
Someone in charge of the library, or
Yeah.
supervising the library.
But the other problem we've noticed is because of how the library works, this thing of scanning, right? And by the way, the scanning thing, they do it if, because you're submitting that thing on CD, if your CD is corrupt, they'll be forced, because you have to submit a paper-based copy, they'll be forced to scan that thing. And we have dissertations that are scanned. It's easy to see the dissertation that are scanned. You find a document that's like 50 megabytes in size, right? Then you know that it's scanned. And the scanning is terrible because you can do some OCR in it. We tried to do that and it was problematic, really.
Yeah, standard images.
Yeah, so it's hard really, but I'm sure there are solutions we can find if we get to a stage where, I mean, some interesting things that we are thinking of doing really is going a step further to see, like, just how much collaboration exists, and like in terms of people citing each other here, like masters and PhD students, do they cite academics at UNZA? Would have to do like OCR on some of these things that are scanned and look at the reference page, right, and see if there's content from Zambia here. But here's the thing, we found about 5% of the 4,000 documents that we harvested are digitized, and these are ETDs actually, so it's less than 4,000 really. Because even though the total content here was, even though the total content that we said we harvested was 4,000, but this 4,000 includes exam papers, right, and all those funny things that they're ingesting in here. Right, so, yeah, so I mean, so like I said, this was like a two-part kind of study. So the next part was like tooling strategies that we think would be like effective, and really what we assessed in most of these things, especially with the repository, is really the efficacy, not the effectiveness, right? Because it's like a controlled environment, really. I won't go into detail on the subject repository. There's a detailed report that was done by fourth-year students. They did it was like a three-pronged study where they were looking at the feasibility, use, and about two, I guess, pronged. Feasibility and is it user experience or something? I can't remember. Of using feasibility of using subject repositories, but they also looked at usability, right? Because I think, what did they use to measure usability? Certainly not Sumi. I don't know what I've forgotten what they used in memory here. Right. So what we did, like tooling strategies, is really open source solutions, and these are things that, thankfully enough, we are part of this, and we've been assisting some schools and some departments to set up online journals. The UNZA has a total of 7 official journals. Out of the 7, none of them are online, none of them are print-based, right? So every time there's a new issue, it's printed out in one. So we're proposing subject repositories as well, and also downstream aggregate services, right? And I'll explain these. We're almost done. So for electronic journals, what we've done is we've gone the open source route. There's a popular tool called Open Journal Systems. It's the same platform that's used by the ICT journal. And I showed us last time that when you go in Google Scholar and search for the ICT journal, you'll find it in there. That's the beauty, right? And this is what you want. If this is done, people from around the world that are searching for content using Google Scholar will be able to find the content that we publish here. Boom. Right? The goal here is increasing the online visibility of Scholar output, right? Let's not forget why we why we wasted time doing all these things here. Yes, it's not world hunger, but we still think this is important. And then, so in terms of the subject repository, This is what we did. So we are looking really at the feasibility of doing this. And we've shown that it's feasible. How do we know it's feasible, right? We know it's feasible because, boom, we've set up this thing here for the department, our department, right? And there's really nothing novel about subject repositories. Any normal institution of higher learning, like this large institution of higher learning, will have subject repositories, right? So it's kind of like a distributed sort of setup where you can have departments with their own repositories that push data to faculty repositories, and the faculty repositories push data to the institution-wide repository, and then these other aggregate services extract data from those things. So it's a hierarchy of sorts, right? And we're almost there. Right, so also this issue of downstream services, again, nothing new about this. People have done this before. We deliberately used a tool that I was a part of the team that kind of developed this tool, but you can use other open source tools. So this is like a tool we use to build like an aggregate service to set up. It's called an ETD portal. If you go to my GitHub repository, I think there's the official pages on the official project pages, and I hope let me just go. I hope Simba is alive. Let me just indefinite. cs.unza.za, cs.uct.za, and then I'll just say, actually, I'll just have to say Simba here, and indefinite. Oh my God, I hope Hussein hasn't, and you know, the transition has been hard, right? I always confuse this. It's Simba, and it's actually indexed, right? Perfect. So I'll just go to pretty easy tool to use, by the way. I also did if you're interested in playing around with this tool. Oh my God, I don't know what he's done to the indefinite instance, right? And I remember Hussein writing an email. I don't know, we're wasting time here. Okay, I'll go to my GitHub account. I think I have a fork there. I'll go to my GitHub. I think it's one of those repositories that I've made public, so you can fork it if you want. Just say etd. Yeah, so it's here, right? So yeah, so this is it. Yeah, you can fork it if you want. And I guess I should include our list thing as being one of the, so it's the same platform that's used for the NDLTD Union Catalog Archive, and then the South African ETD portal as well. We'll include the list subject repository, no, sorry, the Zambia, we'll probably call it the Zambian National ETD portal or something, as being, yeah. My YouTube channel has screencasts of how you can install the software if you're interested in experimenting with it. I don't know what sort of aggregate services you can build with this, but it's not restricted to just ETDs. You can build other aggregate services as long as you're putting information that from portals that make use of the OIPMH protocol, right? All right, so this is what we've set up really. If you go here, you'll find this. We envision a scenario where, sure, we have more than, so CBU here, it's 168 dissertations. And notice like for UNZA, out of the 4,000 dissertations, it's just 1,100 dissertations. 1,000, out of the 4,000 objects, there's only 1,100 of them that are ETDs. All right, just a fraction here. It's like a quarter or something, right? But we're envisioning a situation where all the 60, in an ideal case, all of those 60 universities should be listed here, so that everywhere we populate this and we see how they are performing. And really, when we went to HEA to give our talk, our invited talk, one of the things we taught them was, hey, listen, if you are saying quality is a metric that you use to assess these institutions of higher learning, then how do you ascertain whether University of Lusaka has actually graduated 20 PhDs? Where is the proof? Don't know. Do you just trust someone? Now I'll tell you here, I can fly. How do you know I can fly, right? I don't know. But yeah. So I mean, just to wrap it up here, I know people are getting bored, but in summary, this is what we did. We did two things really, just a content analysis, and then we propose open source tools. But we think that there's some of the really interesting outcomes from this is that there's more we can do. And for the purposes of our CSC 57.1 course here, automatic classification of objects, because we've noticed that the misclassification of digital objects. So you find that those 1,100 ETDs, there are final year project reports in there, which are not supposed to be there. So, but we know that there are simple tricks we can use to automatically classify those things, right? So features like, because DRGS tells you to say a dissertation is supposed to have a maximum of 60,000 words. PhD, maximum of 120 words. So anything with more than 60,000 words is a PhD, right? What else? What other feature? We can extract the first page and do a bag of words and then just search for. We do a frequency table, right? Using our bag of words. So how often do these words occur? Do we have an occurrence of PhD or doctoral or MSc or masters? If we have an occurrence of PhD and doctoral, it's a PhD, right? Simple tricks we can use, right? We have people that are interested in, like I'm co-supervising Angela. She's a LIS student. She was initially interested in looking at challenges and perceptions of looking at IR, but her focus is slowly changing, really, but because these slides are odd. But we can go a step further. We know that there are certain tooling strategies that we can experiment with, specifically if people find it difficult to self-archive, because if you go through the submission workflow of DSpace, it's really painful if you haven't used it before, right? You probably spend 5, maybe even 10 minutes, right? Submitting one object. But we're saying we can simplify this, and because people spend a lot of time in the browser, why can't we build browser plugins that will allow people to ingest content using simple browser applications? And we can do this because we know that these tools are standards based, right? So we can leverage SWORD version 2 protocol, for instance, or version 1, which allows or facilitates remote deposit of content. So people in the past have built like desktop applications where you use a desktop application to ingest content into the repository, for instance, instead of you logging onto DSpace, right? Yeah. And then we think we can come up with better techniques for capturing a comprehensive set of those metadata that we're talking about, because things like supervisors are missing. What can we do, right? And then, of course, this is a big one for us. For us to achieve this goal, for instance, we need to engage like key stakeholders, right? Turns out it's something hard. You need to go to people's offices and knock, right? They don't respond to emails sometimes, which is sad. But usually, the first time you're given the opportunity to give a talk and you shock them. I like shocking people, and I'll leave us with this slide, by the way. Oh, sorry. These are the references in case you're interested. Like if you're trying to understand the IPMH protocol, classic paper here. If you want to understand OJS system, it's here. If you want to better understand the expectation of institutions of higher learning in terms of quality, right, especially public funded institutions of higher learning, and the description of what an institution of higher learning is, look at the Higher Education Act of 2013, right? It's quite explicit. You can find this on, we're talking to the custodians here. But I'll leave us with something that whenever I'm given an opportunity to do this, I like shocking people, because people only, you know how, is it in places like Australia, they say stopping people from smoking, the effective way is putting those pictures of cancer patients, right? So that you see how bad smoking is. Maybe that will stop you from doing that. But yeah, I like leaving people with this slide. But in terms of what is expected of us when we have those invited talks, I like the things we're doing, like asking and interrupting the presenter. We want to do that because that is part of the discussion. We want to participation, right? And then towards the end, if maybe there's something that stood out and you want to maybe initiate a conversation, then we do that. That's what we want. And I'm hoping, right, for certain talks, like when Shashu comes, his sliders, I think sliders is a classic example of some of the interesting things, because they would probably touch on ethics. It's health data, right? So how do they guarantee anonymity, things of that nature? I mean, who has access to, these results, that the tests that they do to people, and then how do they clean up data? Because it turns out it's a difficult problem, and I remember him telling me to say he was really interested in collaborating with with UNZA, especially making use of these final year students like fourth years to see how best they can help him with cleaning up data. So it would be interesting to have him come and give a talk after we discuss how to clean up data once we collect it, right? But shocking is good anyway. So this was that for, this study was done last year really. Yeah, all right. If you're interested in reading up the gory details of the paper, there's a 10, is it a, well, it's a 6-page, I think 10-point font size. It's a 6-page document which was published in ICICT. It's part of the references that I've shared. So it's a paper that you can read. It has more detail.
Share this?
This was already shared.
It was already shared.
Yeah, I sent it via email.
This document.
On Tuesday, after I sent that mail. All right, so if there are no, well, we finished on time, it's 30 minutes before. If you want, we can chat a little bit more about other things, maybe more Python, or we can quit today, or we can maybe have a discussion about some of the things that you think, I mean, I don't know, thoughts on this. I know the Tuesday discussion with the other group was, I think what made it interesting is, I think, memory and who else? They are lecturers, right? So they have an interest in this. So, and rightfully so. I mean, you are obsessed in, maybe you might be interested in image processing because of some of the problems that you have at work. So you might not be interested in this.
No,
maybe.
This is also a
Yeah, maybe some people would be interested in like sentiment analysis, right? If you're looking at extracting, textual content and things of that nature. So, yeah.
See, the way Parliament is,
Yeah.
there's something we're trying to experiment with.
Okay.
We have a library there.
Yes.
And these guys have been digitizing their records now.
Yes.
So they got some good scanner. You run a book through, properly scanned, you can even search through it.
Okay.
Now the problem has been publishing part of that. Okay, they are quite slow in digitizing. So we have that one to have on the digital platform. So
Yeah.
we set up this, but we haven't fully.
It's not publicly available then, is it?
Not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet. When we sort out some issues, I think it will be available.
Okay.
Then, once we sort out the one at Parliament, constituent officers
Right.
have started having small libraries. I think Matero has. So,
Hey, sorry to cut you short before I forget this. What you're describing, right? Those constituents libraries, you can set up an aggregate service. It doesn't have to use this tool. Incidentally, you can use DSpace to pull. I don't know if you've figured this out.
not yet.
The collections, you define collections in two different ways. One of the ways is you can define a collection that is going to automatically harvest content from an external source. So those, so the big kahuna, the DSpace instance here at Parliament can harvest content from these things, and then you have collections for.
So I think with what I've seen from your presentation, I want them to communicate.
And this is the thing we should do. If you've taken time to read Vision 2030, right? We aspire to be, and this is the ICT sector goal. We are aspiring to be an information and knowledge-based society by 2030. Hey, TikTok, 11 more years, right? What are we doing? Those are the questions we're asking ourselves, right? But maybe people don't care. But I was telling people, they thought I was joking. They laughed anyway, thought it was a joke. I was saying, there's no one who's going to come and help us here. We are the help here. People like, and you know that you people, right? Especially you people, you're in privileged positions, right? You might downplay your position, but you're big people. You have so much influence, right? So it's we need to think long and hard beyond that paycheck at the end of the month. Yes, I mean we all come for work because we need that, but we should think about the bigger picture, right?
No, actually, it's very true. You know, I was last week there was this man who came to see my boss.
Yeah.
So yeah, apparently he has built some enterprise service bus system.
Okay.
He claims you have your own systems, but you can plug them in. Then the system will be warehousing the data, and then you can do data mining on it from some of its modules. And he's willing to give us for free, including the source code. They are not yet done writing that system.
What are they getting in return though?
Huh? So
That's
here
the
the catch is, I think they want the first client, someone to refer to that.
I see.
And look at that big institution.
Wow.
So they've written some things for Bank of Zambia, blah, blah, blah. Now, so he comes up, he tells me all that stuff. I say, okay, this is good. But this week I'm not in the office. After this week, we'll sit down and talk. Maybe we can have a look at what you're trying to do. So one of the things he said was, you know, your boss told me to come and see you, and everything is dependent on you. So what you say is what your boss will do.
You're an important person here. That's the key word. And you know, we usually it's very easy to downplay the influence that we have, right? Very easy. But you know, increasingly, especially our age group, we now hold influential positions. So the question is, how do we really make better use of the power we have, right? You know, so something to think about here. Not just there's life beyond CSC 5741. It's not just for marks here and the dissertation, right? It's about what we can do to, like it's we are all what small little cogs in this big machine we call Zambia, right? I mean, you might think what you're doing is insignificant, but in the grand, well, at least in the grand scheme of things, but you're contributing towards, you know, making Zambia a better place to live in. Yeah. All right, so maybe we can call it a day if that's the case, or we can do more programming perhaps. Or maybe we can experiment with logging in to see if we have.
Sure. I'm going to get to these Google groups.
Or
Are
Google.
they restricted to the
No.
at
So,
UNZA?
no. I can.
Having with an appended domain at unza.za in the username.
Yeah. So
Now, what's my username?
your username is just your email actually. So you log in with your email address.
What's my email address?
Your the one you registered with us is I can check just now. Sorry about that. Members, and I'll check David here. Oh, sorry, what's your email address?
Huh?
What's your email address? Muteka. Okay. You're the class rep, right?
Yeah.
Defect. So what I would do, the other thing is, just in case, I mean, this is always nice. What I would do is I'll just do this. I will say, I'll add you as a manager, and then you can do, people don't just have to come to me and say, it's always nice to have two people actually, seeing as the de facto people that are here, we can do the same. So you can add other email addresses. Those, in fact, once people start using the UNZA email addresses, you can add them there if you want to. It would be nice, actually, David. So I'll also change the role for David, and then you can do likewise. So you'll be managers and whatnot. So you registered with mlengaDavid@gmail.com. So when you should be able to log in, but the thing is, what will happen is, let me see, maybe it's a configuration. So I'm in my personal Gmail account here, and I'll click this thing here. Hopefully this is the thing I haven't figured out. I think because I'm logging in here for the first time, it will probably prompt me to log in, right? Oh no, I'm logged on. No. Why is it doing this? Because I'm logging in using two different accounts. Let me see.
Yeah, it's a Google account. I mean, the Gmail, I think. I don't know, because I'm not logged in here before.
You haven't? It's so UNZA. I don't know if you figured. I mean, they've told you this, but UNZA has outsourced. This is a managed service now. Email is managed by Google. So they signed an MOU. So as part of the perks, again, I think Google is harvesting information from us, but it's free of charge apparently.
Indexing emails too. So.
Oh, I see what you mean. It's asking for a Google account. Let me see. Maybe it's a configuration here.
A Google account with @unza.com.
Yeah,
So it was computer number at student.
It shouldn't be the case. I think I can change the settings. Let me say options here.
Maybe I think you've even gone a step further. You've logged there.
But I think this is my
Your
Gmail
personal
account, yeah. So I need to log out from here first.
You try to log out. Because I'm trying to get these presentations, these documents.
Yeah, yeah. This is strange. I mean, so this is the only thing I needed to change, the configuration. Like, oh, you can view topics. Okay. Let's see, maybe access permissions.
So the UNZA, this computer number.
So
student.unza.zm.
yes.
Is it permanent or after the program they grab it?
I think it's permanent. I don't know, I think it's a lifetime type thing, unless if they've come up with a funny arrangement.
Excuse me.
All right, see you. Thanks. Enjoy your weekend, Pierre. Thanks for joining us.
So this is why you said they didn't share the one document that about how to read this.
Yes, you've managed to log in?
I can't log in yet. Let me try with Mulenga David. Yeah?
Yes. But yeah, I don't know what's happening here. I thought I probably need more time to look at this further, but new topic non-selected.
It's not as bad as password. Authentication failed. This group is on a private domain.
So with Mlenga David, that's what it's saying?
Yes. So maybe I need the user one.
Yeah. There has to be. Let me just see if Google Groups. Oh, so I've given you, what I've done is I've given you manage access so you can add people. So what's your, let's do this. A quick way of doing it is, see under members, I'll just say, what's your computer number? 2018?
To give you the old one.
Okay.
2018. 24 91 34.
Now, the funny thing about UNZA, I thought if you've studied here, why give you another thing?
New one.
Yeah.
See, I was even thinking about coming to make a system for these guys, manages these things. The program should be under an account.
Can you try with your,
Okay, so
with your,
let me log out.
Yeah.
See if I will have anything some additional privileges.
I'm surprised that I'm finding it hard to make the change for. We've maybe web view customization.
Okay, so what am I expected to see?
You've managed to log in?
Okay, there's this one for data mining.
Yeah, I would have to content control. I will look into this to see how we can allow the permanent. It should. I thought it was allowing people to you see, once you log in as using your personal, is it your private email account, those Gmail and Yahoo things. What I thought it was automatically able to do as well is to allow you to log in like so.
Then these are the shared documents.
Yeah.
So we have lecture 2 PDF, lecture 2 handout,
Mm-hmm.
then scholarly.
Kamba, we should, you've added yourself? Maybe I can add you as well here.
Oh, okay. It's 2018,
2018,
25, 28, 28.
25, 28, 28. Like so, right? And then at your own time, you can also you can also kind of log in using your UNZA email if you want to see past topics like so. Yeah, I thought people. Yeah, it turns out I have to. I'm failing to log in using my personal Gmail account as well. I don't know. There has to be a way of.
To link the two accounts.
Hmm.
To allow the other one. So, Python.
Yeah.
Which one here of these documents you shared? There are 4.
Okay. Which
one
post are you?
is about how to read the papers and
Which one are you looking at? Which of these are you looking?
I'm on lecture slide
1, 2. This that says available on web page. Is it this?
Let's see, it's one.
This?
Yeah, I think so.
No. So this is the okay. These were the handouts for the Python kind of thing. But what you want to do is go to, I think it's lecture slide number 1. So you go here, presentation slide for lecture 1 on course web page, and I think as part of no. This is weird. So it's the one that was sent on March 21st, which says we have class tomorrow. Please bring along laptops plus not different lecture venues. So it has a list of those papers, but also the lecture slide number, is it 1? Sorry, it also has links to the papers as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in this case, have we already? What paper are we going to read?
So I'm sending out a paper on educational data mining, hopefully before 23 hours today. And then all we have to do is just briefly summarize. It's not a hard paper to read really, just to get a sense of, I think he has a brief description of how he collected the data. And I know we are proposing a paper before, but maybe we should change it to a more general paper, I suppose, that describes what data mining is. There are plenty of options, maybe one classic or something. But the thing here is wanted a way to get started with this whole process. And to do a test, because even though we've done a trial test for the presentation, we've not done a trial test for paper reading, so we don't want to suggest something that's going to be overly kind of complex and whatnot, just a simple read. So in our LIS class, we normally start with a classic, as we may think. It's a classic 1979 paper that underpins the basic things that we cover in the entire course. So maybe we can find a similar paper here and suggest it here. But the email that will be sent through will have details on how you summarize it. So things like it shouldn't exceed a page, and it should have these elements. The formatting should be like this. Now, you notice that we'll obsess a lot about things like formatting, and if you have references, the style of reference, because we all want to get used to what will be expected of us once we write the proposal and once we start writing the dissertation. Right, so even though you want to work on a data mining project, but at least we want you to get something out of this besides the marks, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's part of the learning. Okay, then what other thing?
Yeah.
I've installed okay, so I have text shop.
Text shop.
And those are
Tech shop or tech shop.
Then I also have this
Mendeley. Have you created an account yet?
I created an account.
Okay.
I can log in from the
Web interface? Not the desktop.
The desktop app, I think.
So as a starting point, what you want to do is actually get to a stage where you're able to maybe, if I were you actually, to practice maybe something to keep you busy over the weekend. These readings that we are suggesting, let me show you how Mendeley looks like on mine. You have it should work if you can log in on the web interface. You should be able to log in on the desktop as well. Oh, I haven't logged on here. Let me just. Now so there's some of these things, right?
So you want to go to the group? Yeah. Yes.
So what you want to already start doing here is see here. I have a lot of things open. What you want to already start doing is maybe create some sort of because you can create a folder structure. So if I were you, I would have maybe you do different things in advanced web. What do you call it? Web what? There's advanced distributed systems. There's advanced web. I don't know what you call it. Yeah. So to practice. In fact, if you are doing paper readings in there as well, you can do what I normally do. You see this panel on the top right, in my case? This is how I organize my Mendeley folder, right? I have stuff to do with, because I have private projects and stuff to do with, let's say if I'm writing a paper or something, I organize them by year, for instance, right? And then I have different, so references that I'm collecting for a paper that I might be writing are here. When I was writing my PhD, I had references related to the different chapters, for instance, and the year when I collected those references, these are them. When I was writing my master's, I also did the same thing. So what I'm saying is you can create folders as a starting point, you can just say maybe MSc taught, and then you have folders for all the different courses, and then this how to read the paper thing, you put it in the CSC 5741 folder, right? So that you have a more organized hierarchy. The reason you want to do that is to get used to using Mendeley. If you are going to adopt Mendeley as your paper manager, your bibliographic manager, right? If you decide to switch to Zotero, you can do the same thing, right? This is really helpful, actually. By the way, Mendeley, I don't know if you picked up on this, quite a really powerful platform. It has groups as well, right? You've noticed that the web interface. You have. So let me open up the web interface. So if I go here, for instance, and say if I log into my Mendeley profile, right? Like so, Mendeley. If I log in, you can actually. It's like an academic social thing, by the way. As you are going through this journey, by the way, if I were you, I'd create a Google Scholar profile, academia.edu profile, ResearchGate profile, right? I mean, you never know where you might find a solution that would be helpful, right? There are these communities, clusters of communities that have been created. So in Mendeley, there are groups as well, where like-minded people meet, right, or ask questions. So if I log in here, you notice that I'm a part of certain groups that do interesting things, right, related to the things that I'm interested in, obviously. By interesting, I mean things that my research interests, right? It's taking a bit of time, but when it comes up, if I go to groups, yeah? If I go to groups, I'll be able to see, and people share papers here. This is powerful stuff here. So digital libraries, for instance, this was, you can actually create a group for your CS, your current cohort, MSc cohort, where you share papers, for instance, right? To try and encourage your other colleagues to use this tool as well, right? So you're sharing resources instead of sharing them via WhatsApp anyway, because you can actually annotate them here, right? So what example can I give? I needed a private public group like this, for instance. If I go in here, it has 53 members, for instance. If I go in it because I have an interest in ICT for development, if I go in here, you see I can see members, and then I can also see documents that these people have shared, right? So these would be like maybe classic documents that researchers in this field think you should read if you're a beginner researcher, right? So if you're interested in data mining, this is a perfect way to find like-minded people. Of course, there are other portals like, Reddit, obviously, right? There, you'll find places where people share papers on Reddit. If you're a Reddit type person, yeah, but this is perfect actually. Your ResearchGate as well has features that you can use to do these things, right? So yeah, it has a number of features. So it's not just that. You can also create your profile where it's a public profile that showcases what you've done. So when you write your dissertation, you can put it here, and then similar to what LinkedIn does really, but this is more for academic type stuff, which is why you have professional experience in education, and then there should be a list of papers somewhere. So publications here, right? You know, if you've edited, if you've been part of an editorial and whatnot, you do that. And there are many such platforms, right? Anyway, but if you're not an aspiring academic, perhaps you might not be interested in some of these things. But what I do myself, right? I'm all over the place because I've kind of implicitly studied, I've taken an interest in trying to understand how academia works. So I know that to increase my odds in maybe increasing the number of readership for the things that I'm doing, I must be all over, right? Duplicate content. My blog, academia.edu, has things I've published. Mendeley has things I've published, right? ResearchGate, I have an ORCID ID, right? So if you look at my ORCID, so people have been obsessing, I don't know if you've heard, it's Open Researcher and Contributor ID. So people, because of the confusion that exists, you're not the only David Mlenga that exists, right?
Yeah.
So when people are searching,
that have been cited somewhere.
yeah.
No one cites me, but there's a researcher at CBU.
Yeah. So here's the thing, right? So once you publish, for instance, people will think you're the same David Mlenga. So what people have done is they've introduced this ORCID ID, which is supposed to uniquely identify each researcher, right? So you can create a profile here which automatically identifies you as scholar here. But most of these things really, and the beauty with what you're doing right now, right? Remember the learning by osmosis. As you're interacting with Lighton in CSC 5741, there will be things that you'll find useful, plenty of useless things, but pick out the useful things. You're interacting with Mayumbu, he will introduce you to other interesting things. Pick out the positives. Lampi will do the same thing. You know, Jackson will do the same thing. And that's the beauty with the current setup you have, this taught thing, right? The fact that, in fact, it even gets better, right? The teaching style is probably different as well, right? The approach to teaching. So just pick out the positive things and take advantage of this. I mean,
True.
yeah. All right, I guess we'll have to call it a day if there are no questions. The tech thing, the LaTeX thing, did you manage to run it?
Yeah, it's running.
The beauty with LaTeX is depending on which editor you're using, there are usually templates that exist. So do I have Kyle here? I use Kyle as my front-end IDE. My goodness, I don't think I have Kyle. So with Kyle as an example, because I've been using Kyle religiously for a very long time, it has templates. So templates for creating an article, templates for creating a report. So it gives you a scaffold. I don't have it here. It gives you a scaffold of instead of you writing those LaTeX elements from scratch, right? You have a starting point. But these are all, I'll be surprised if people don't typeset their documents next year here. I'll bet you, I think all of the dissertations that I was internal examiner for but no, I don't think, I think all of Mayumbu's students used LaTeX. Yeah, I think he insisted that he used LaTeX. He probably spent time not insisted, but he spent time explaining to them the advantages of doing that. You show them how easy it is to do certain things, right? So the assignment that will be shared, for instance, you'll be given a pointer to where the template for the report you will be gotten from. So you have the option to use LaTeX or Word. There's a template for Word and LaTeX. If you want, you can experiment with LaTeX. It's just a template. All you do is you're just putting content in the template.
Right.
The only things you probably struggle with initially is the floats, right? So if you have code listing, what tags are you going to use to list your code? How are you going to play around with figure placement, right? If you want the figure to occupy the entire width, if you're using 2 columns, right? If you want to force the figure to appear at a certain position, I mean, but those are, because there's a large community built around LaTeX, it's very easy to find solutions. All you have to do is just go to Stack Overflow or StackExchange.com. Yeah. Yeah, there's probably LaTeX tag. I mean, most people that are tech oriented actually use it for typesetting. You know how sometimes the things that we worry about, you feel important, you feel some sense of pride when you use certain tools, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's like an initiation of sorts. Say, right. When you're doing this, you're supposed, or you're expected to do that, right? It's the same for LaTeX, I guess. When you're an engineer or someone who's working with a lot of formulas, like in maths, for instance, and physics, so the people that extensively use LaTeX. It's a lot easier to write formulas then, right?
Okay.
All right. I guess we can call it a day then.
Yeah, that's the same one.
And say we are looking forward to meeting tomorrow, and it's Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yep.
Wow.
It's getting easier.
Yeah, it is, and yeah, and going forward, I suppose we'll stop forcing people to come